we've got Kristian, who's going to be talking to us about how to screw up hiring. So please join me in welcoming Kristian.
Good morning. My name is Kristian Glass. I hope you've enjoyed all the other talks you've seen so far. I want to talk to you about, as Alex said, how to screw up hiring. Hiring is hard to do well, but easy to do badly. I'm going to tell you about some things you don't want to do, along with some things you can do that are better. Now, this is a complex and nuanced topic. I have 24 minutes at best, so this is going to be a high-level summary of sound bites and broad, sweeping generalizations. It's something I care deeply about seeing done well, so if you'd like to chat more and with more nuance, please grab me afterwards. I'm around. Ultimately, if there's only one thing you take away from my talk, it's this. Hiring processes reflect the organizations that create them. So if you're on the hiring side, think really hard about what you're putting in front of people who want to join you. And if you're on the other side of the table, think about the people who created the system you're going through, the kind of things they're setting up for success and failure, and the kind of people who've got through the process before you. So some of you are or have been in the position of making hiring decisions. Some of you are or have been involved in hiring processes as interviewers or reviewers. Even if not, you're probably in a position to influence someone who is, and you may even be in that position yourself in the future. Even if none of that, chances are you may be trying to get hired at some point, and I just want you to know that it can be better. I've spent a lot of the last years developing and operating software, but over the last 4 years, part of my job involved growing a team from around half a dozen when I joined to about 30 when I left. I've seen a lot of organizations and how they hire, and I do not for a moment claim that I can tell you how to do it well. But I can certainly tell you some things to avoid. So starting off with job ads, usually people's first real contact point with your hiring process. I'm going to take some wisdom here from one of my early loves, the Spice Girls. Tell me what you want, what you really, really want. Hands up, how many people get that reference? Am I okay, that's good. That's good. And I'm quite impressed the GIF works as well. Like, I was not expecting that because, as we all know, computers. So, tell me what you want. Remove your terrible requirements. Biggest way to annoy me with a job ad? Require things you don't actually require. The list of things you actually require, probably quite short. So a previous organization I worked with, they required the following 3 things. They required a good command of the English language, because they were an international team and it helps if you can communicate. They required you to be a self-directed learner, because they were a small team. They didn't have proactive mentoring set up. They needed you to be able to find and learn the things you needed to learn. They required you to have a baseline understanding of building software for the web, because that's what they did. They didn't care if you hadn't used Django or AWS. If your experience was deploying Ruby to Google, that was still broad enough context for them. And as we all know, off by 1 error is a common. The 4th thing they required, out of 3, was no previous convictions for financial crimes, because they happened to be a payments processor, and it turns out insurance and regulators don't look too well on you getting people with a history of doing inappropriate things with other people's money and putting them in a position where they can have access to a lot of other people's money. That was it. Those were their 4 requirements. And that's a good list of legitimate requirements. Most requirements lists you'll see on job ads, they're things that are good. They're things that they would like to see. They're things that they think correlate well with success. And that's good information. That's important stuff. Say it, but call it what it is. Call it a nice to have. Call it a list of things you'd like to see. Be honest about what it is that you want. Let people tell you what they bring to the table. Tell people what you want to see from them, give them goals, and let them tell you how they satisfy them. If you have all your services built in Django, and you want someone comfortable and experienced with modern Django, say that. Don't tell them that you want 4 years of Django experience. I don't know what magic happens at the 4th year that doesn't happen at the 3rd, but Come on, people. Tell people what you want. On that note, a little personal bugbear of mine, you do not need a degree, probably, generally. There's some things where, like, this is legitimately a thing. Law, medicine, I would quite glad that my doctors had medical degrees. It was quite useful. Quite important, really. But you do not need a degree in computer science to write code or to work in tech. Do I think a degree in computer science is useful? Absolutely. Do I think it's necessary? Almost never. If you're hiring people to work on hardcore database internals or kernels or language systems, I get it. Those are quite heavy on the computer science, and a CompSci degree, super useful. But it is not the only way to know about computer science, and it is definitely not the only way to know about tech or programming. A degree is a form of evidence. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Telling me you don't know of any bugs in your code is very different to telling me that there are no bugs in your code. So what do? Tell people what you're like. Tell people about the tech you have, the team you have, the people you have, your problems, your goals, your ideas. Remember, you're trying to sell people on the job. It's a two-way process. You want to not only select the right people that apply, but you want to get the people you want to apply. Got that right. So next up, take-home tests. I feel like I see more and more jobs setting homework for applicants. Go away and write some code to do X. I always feel like take-home tests require a certain amount of bravery and confidence to set. You're sending someone off to spend time and doing work on a task you've set them with limited opportunities for feedback, for guidance, clarification, or encouragement. Quite often, people use it as the first step in the process, so it's part of their application process. Suddenly, it's 4 hours to apply to a job at your company before you get to speak to a human, as opposed to something further along the line. So at that point, a candidate has very little investment. I mean, if you're a household name like Amagoo, Book, Netflix, Soft, maybe you can get away with it, but I've never worked at something that famous. But again, tell me what you want. Tell me what you want. Tell people what you want to see from them so that they can give you their best. Tell people how to succeed. Help them succeed by telling them what success looks like. Give people your scoring system for your take-home test. If you don't have a scoring system for your take-home test, fix that, stop winging it. We asked Bobby to look at it, and they think it looks good. Doesn't really cut it. Zen of Python, people. Explicit is better than implicit. Be realistic with what you're asking people to do. If the job's going to consist of mostly getting some JSON from somewhere on the internet, doing some stuff to it, sending some JSON elsewhere, that's great. Don't ask someone to implement some complex sorting algorithms. Unless it's really relevant to what you do, don't ask them to re-implement bits of the standard testing library. It's an easy exercise to set, but what does it tell you? What does it tell people that you want to see from them? Give people things to do that are representative of things you want to see from them. And set boundaries in what you ask. The more self-contained and well-bounded the work you ask from people, the better. Open-ended, impress us tasks can easily end up over-privileging the time rich. 21-year-old me, I was dangerously keen to spend evenings and weekends hacking on some cool tech problem. 30-something me is a little more thoughtful and nuanced about how I spend my time. Different people will do different things, especially if you haven't given them a clear scoring rubric. The candidate who decides to spend extra time adding unasked for test suites to the one-off web crawler you had them build, they're not necessarily better than the one who just solved the problem as you asked and moved on. Tell people what you want. And give people something they want to do. Test your exercise on people around you. If people on your team look at the new exercise that you're going to set candidates and they find it boring or they struggle with it or they don't want to do it, those are people, that's feedback. Use that feedback. Don't then give that to applicants that you want to impress and encourage. If your exercise is terrible, don't inflict it on other people. So what can you do other than not that stuff? So a great thing is, here's some code, it's got a test suite, it's got some bugs, can you fix it so the tests pass? because it's closed-ended, it's pass-fail, so it's easy for you to score, it's easy for them to know what they need to do, and it's realistic. Who doesn't have bugs they need to fix? And think about the trade-offs you're making. There are companies out there who are setting terrible take-home tests for people to do before they ever get to speak to a human, and wonder why they are struggling to get good applicants. Finally, interviews. When you found a good GIF, just keep using it. It's great. Be realistic. Typical development job. You have an IDE. It probably has a working autocomplete. If you use Vim and you have that working, someone talk to me afterwards, please. Cheers. But you have Google. You have Stack Overflow. You have all of these resources at hand. So asking someone to stand in front of a whiteboard and regurgitate or invent an algorithm to detect cycles in a linked list, not a fan. Be supportive of people. You want to get the best from these people that you've got in front of you. Help them show you their best. If your interviews are adversarial, you are fundamentally doing something wrong and dangerous. Nobody likes magic answers. There's been a bit of a trend of giving people these questions. How many manholes can I fit on an aeroplane that's traveling, whatever, where either they know the answer or they know how to figure it out straight off, in which case you know nothing other than they read this from the same list that you did beforehand, or maybe they can work it out, but an interview is not a pleasant environment in which to have to do that. And you can do this well. You can be supportive. You can be clear about what you want, that you don't expect them to know the answer, that you want to see how they think. You can tell them that you want to see that. You can help them, but don't just drop a question at them and leave them waiting. That's just cruel. So there are lots of ways you can easily do not great things while hiring, but hiring and recruitment are some of the most important activities an organization can do, and they should be treated accordingly. Whether you are a company looking to hire software developers, or you are a volunteer group looking to get people to carry the organization on next year, it is the most important activity you will participate in, growing the people around you and adding people to that group. So stop blindly copying others. So many of the bad things you see will come from sloppiness, they'll come from laziness, they'll come from well-intentioned, here's an example, let's use that, it must have worked okay for them, right? Sometimes it comes from the things you had the misfortune of experiencing yourself, and you've sort of Stockholm syndromed into this must be okay. Don't just Google the top 100 interview questions and pick from those. Don't just ask semi-obscure tech questions where you happen to know the answer. Be thoughtful about the process you're implementing. Be thoughtful about what you're asking people to do, what you're giving people, the trade-offs you're making, and what you're doing. Test what you're doing. Run it on people around you. Run it on your colleagues within the organization. Run it on your friends, willing victims, volunteers, all those V words. Get people through your system, find out what works, find out what doesn't, and change things accordingly. Don't just stick with a standard templated system that you got off the internet and think it looks good. Get the data, get the feedback, modify things accordingly. So thank you all very much. I'm Kristian Glass. You're a lovely audience. Any questions? Let me know.